Welcome to the Trellix Spotlight series. My name is Nick, and I will be your host. Today's session will focus on ePolicy Orchestrator automation using tags for product deployments and updates. This webinar will be recorded. If you prefer not to participate in the recorded session, please feel free to disconnect at this time. A link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This webinar is a brief overview covering common use cases and scenarios regarding this topic. It is not intended to be all-encompassing. If assistance is needed, please contact Trellix Technical Support. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A window. This webinar may run longer or shorter based on your participation, and we recommend asking as many questions as you can to make the most of this series. If the Q&A window is not displayed, click the tab at the bottom of your session window and click on the Q&A icon. We will answer the questions during the final section of this webinar. If you experience any audio issues during the webcast, please drop and attempt to reconnect. Our speaker today is Anthony Newsom. Anthony is a senior technical training instructor at Trellix, specializing in on-premise security administration. Anthony has been in the tech industry for over 15 years with experience at all levels of administration before moving into the education field, where he's developed and delivered both custom and standard courses. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony.
Thanks, Nick, for that introduction. So, to utilize tags to automate our product deployments and product updates. So, to go through this, the first thing we need to do is understand how tags are working. We then need to look at the potential for automation and how we can use those tags to automate our environment. To be able to use that potential, we need to look at the data sources. So we need to gather that data so we can create the tags appropriately to then use it within the automation, automating your environment, freeing up your hands as an administrator, allowing you to do more meaningful work rather than doing the day-to-day activities. We'll then go through a live demo in the pre-configured environment that I've set up for you so that you can see some of these things in practice. We won't be creating the tags, etc. from scratch. I've pre-created those so we can investigate the methodology and the reasoning behind each of them. So, how these tags are working. So the first thing we need to do, step one, you can see we've got our administrator and we've got the business need. So to build this out, we need to have a business reason that we're going to create those tags, and the administrators need to liaise with the business to identify that need. Now, in our example that we're going to be using, say, for example, we've got a mature environment. We need to identify if a product needs to be installed. So we create that tag appropriately. From there, we create, as part of that tag creation, this is essentially just a series of questions. Does it meet this criteria? This is essentially creating a query to the database to drag out that information. Once we've saved that tag, we've then queried the database. EPO has that ability to orchestrate the environment, can automate everything, apply those tags. Those tags can be assigned to client tasks, automating things without your need to get involved, essentially. So when we look at it from an automation point of view, the client task side of things, this is where we're getting the products to actually do something. In the specific case for this particular webinar, it's going to be based around product deployments and product updates, deploying a new product onto the agent, getting the agent to update from version 1 to version 2 of a product, for example. This will require you to have the product pre-installed and pre-staged ready to go. Product updates need to have been downloaded from the product download site so that you can actually deploy the updates as part of that client task. We'll have a look at these inside the environment as well, though. Another thing we can use our tags in regards to automation is for specifically policy assignment rules. Now, we're not going to be going into this particular side of automation during this webinar, though. Now, when we're talking policy assignment rules, this can be either a human-based rule or a machine-based rule. Now, if we're talking tags for policy assignment, it has to be a system-based rule. This system has this tag, so it gets this policy, for example. That will override the system tree policies or the policies assigned into the system tree levels if you've got specific machines assigned by tag to policies. The last thing you can do in regards to using tags for automation is in regards to our system tree sorting. If this tag exists on this system, it goes to this particular part of the system tree structure. And that's really all it comes down to in regards to our automating the environment. There's lots of other uses for tags that we're not going into as part of this particular webinar session. Essentially, it all comes down to your imagination. What can you design for a function? Can you design a tag based on that information to then produce some kind of functionality within EPO? Our focus, though, literally around the deployment and updates. So, our data sources. Now, as you can see from our screen here, we've got two main sources of data that we can use. Now, the first one we can talk about is that external based sources. Now, this is where we're talking outside of the environment. Your corporate standard operating or system operating or standard operating environment, depending on the terminology that you're using. But your corporate SOE, this is going to have that structure. You should be using this version of product, this particular updates. Are you using cumulative updates? All those sort of things. This is going to be driven at the corporate level, pushed down through to the administrators to make sure you've got the correct version in accordance with the security posture and configurations required for that particular company. That can all be sourced either through your chain of command internally inside your corporate structure, or you can refer to any documentation that's been produced for the administrators to go off. Internally to EPO, so we're talking about the actual environment now. Now, when we look at it from that internal point of view, we have our summary dashboard. We can use this to look at things like what versions of products are we running. So this is talking about major versions. We're talking DAT files, things like that. What's sitting in the environment versus what can we source from the internet. Our software catalog for downloading up-to-date software, looking at software versions through there as well. Our main repository, the main repository being where all of that software gets stored, updates, service packs, all those get stored in the repository. We can grab that information from that location as well to allow us to then create an update task based around what the most current version of the software is. Our system information. Now, this is going to become key when we start looking at updates, for example. I'm running version 1 on workstation 1. Inside my main repository, I've got version 2. So you can use your system information to interrogate what's on an individual system to then create queries further down the line to find out where the exposure within your environment for lack of better words, a non-compliant in accordance with your corporate environment for product version control. So you can look at all those sort of things through there, create your tags based on these different pieces of information. Now, as part of the pre-work that I've done prior to setting this up for you, I've done all of this sort of things for our little environment, so that way we can review what work's been done, and we'll talk about some of the assumptions in the lab environment itself. So let's get into our demo for utilizing those tags for product deployments and updates. So I'm in the EPO now. We can see I've gone straight to my tag catalog. This is not going to be our start point though. This is just where I was working prior to the webinar commencing. So the first thing we're going to start up is at our system tree. Now, one of the assumptions that we're going to have in this environment, so this is designed around a mature environment. Now, the assumption we're going to make is that I've created an Active Directory synchronization targeting this specific folder. Because this specific folder exists, as soon as that Active Directory synchronization kicks off, anything that it has been placed in there as a brand new laptop, for example, or a brand new workstation, is going to synchronize into the system tree. Now, these will come in, they will not have the agent deployed straight away. So the first thing that we need to do from that regards is we'd need to set up that server task. And we'd need to set up tags to identify things as well. We're not going to be covering that agent deployment side of things because your organization may be doing things such as having the agent included as part of the image, as part of your WDS or your RIS process. You may be having a manual solution for your agents for more control over that initial install. It may be a case of that you're partnering with your users by getting them to use the web link install. So we're not going to be talking about that automation of the agent specifically at this stage. We're going to be focused on the product sitting on top of the agent from that side. But just keep in the back of your mind, there is some ways we can automate that agent deployment as well. So we've got my two systems in here, as we can see that I've I've got imported into my environment. Workstation 1 and my SRV being my database server. Now, the first thing we need to do is we start looking at version control. So we can see that they're both managed. So we've got an agent on there. SRV, however, has this tag that's been applied. You can see it requires ENS updates. It requires the ENS threat prevention and platform to actually be installed. This is the part of those tags that I've pre-set up. If we want to get some of that information about the products themselves later on, we're going to come back in here to drill down into that product to gain that information in regards to that product update tag that I built previously. So some other locations we can use, as I said, to gather information. Our dashboard. If we go into our dashboard, into our EPO summary, we can see, and if we just look at the DAT file up here as a perfect example, we can see it's in red. This is what's sitting currently in the main repository. That is the current DAT file in my environment. What's available on my source repository, being directly connected through to Trellix, is a different version. So there's been an update. So I can look at this straight away and I know, hang on, I've got an update I need to run. I can also look and see which version I'm running for our engines and our DAT files to create product update tasks, specifically targeting by version control, which we'll be talking about when we get to the tag design itself. Let's get to our tag catalog now. So the first tag we're going to be looking at is our deployment tag. Now, the assumption here is we have the agent deployed, whether you've done it through Windows Deployment Service, whether you've done it through a manual agent push, however you've got it in there, but we're assuming we've got the agent on there. So I've created my subgroup based around automation. Now we can see in here, I've got my 3 different tags that were created. The one that we're going to be focused on here is based around this deploy ENS threat prevention and platform. Now, what I want to focus on in here, not so much concerned about the name, we're concerned about our criteria when we start talking about the tag creation, when we're talking about deployments. Now, if we're targeting a specific product, now, as long as EPO is managing it, as long as the agent's sitting on the endpoint, you can deploy any of those products straight onto the agent, as long as you've got that compatibility and you've got that coverage. Now, with our criteria, identify the product that you're wanting to install. Now, in our example, platform and threat prevention. Because threat prevention relies on the platform to be installed anyway as part of that ENS side of things, as long as we've got that value is blank in there for threat prevention, we can then have that task run, cover it, or use this tag to run that initial install, both for threat prevention as well as the platform, which will then structure the your threat prevention solution onto your endpoint. So that's the first thing we need to look at there. The second thing we need to look at, as you can see from our systems, when you're building this out from scratch, obviously you have it to apply now, so you're covering off on what's already in your environment. That's the first step there. We're not going to worry about any of the systems that have got the tag on there. This is just identifying specific systems. You can then take actions on them. We're not concerned about that. What the other thing we're going to be concerned about in this particular task is the evaluation. Make sure we've got that box ticked, because that way, whenever the agent runs the ASCII, it's going to be interrogated by this tag. Is this tag appropriate to be assigned? If it does meet that criteria to be assigned, it'll hit that tag. We then have that client task that's going to be assigned by tag to run that deployment at whatever time of day you've chosen. We'll talk about that client task and the client task assignment once we've finished up with this tag. For our restrictions and usage, we don't really need to worry about that too much. Restrictions, not in the scope of this webinar. Usage will just tell us that it's currently being used for my task that I built previously. So that's building out that specific tag based around a deployment task. Now we've got that tag, we can build out our task. We can then build out our client task assignment. So moving from there, we're going to go straight into our client task catalog, and we're going to review the product deployment that I pre-built for you earlier. Now we can see in here, I've got my ENS platform and threat prevention deployment. This is fairly straightforward. We don't really need to go too much into here. Basically, target the correct version of the product that you're wanting to install based on this tag. This is the easy part. The next thing is we need to assign this task. So we just cancel out of here. We're going to go back to our system tree because I've already assigned this. I'm going to review the assignment. So into our system tree, under our assigned client tasks, well, we can see our client task has been assigned. We can see it's on a daily schedule. We can see it at 3 a.m. Let's go though and have a look at more details of how we've actually filtered this out. So going into our environment, we can see first off, we had to assign it at that specific level of the tree. That's good. That's the only thing that we've not sort of covered as part of this process. Make sure you're targeting the right level of your system tree to automate your environment. We then make sure you're targeting the correct task, yeah, inheritance, but the important things when we start looking at is using these tags. As you can see, the tag criteria that I've used, the only computer that will receive this particular task is the one that has been identified as not having that product installed in the environment already. You can see we had two in that sub area of, or that subgroup of my system tree. Don't know why that's highlighting like that, but that's all good. So we've got that one system being affected, being my SRV server. You can then configure that time appropriately so it's not going to infect, or I shouldn't say infect, but affect your operational environment. So we're looking at when your users are not going to be busy, when you're not going to impact your operational functionality of the workplace effectively. I've picked 3 a.m. at the morning because that's a great time because nobody's ever working except for the night shift. Any randomization you want to use, however you're wanting to control and manage your deployment to look after network bandwidth and such. Once you're happy with that, you'd hit that save button. We're just going to cancel out though. And that would essentially cause that task to run to deploy onto my SRV at 3 o'clock in the morning based on that specific tag, which as per my computer time down here means that it'd be deployed in about 7 hours time, give or take. So set and forget. The next day when I come in, I want to review that the product has been deployed successfully because it's been deployed overnight. I can use my workstation 1 to review this. We just go into workstation 1, reviewing the product, and we can see that it was deployed successfully. And we've essentially done an automated deployment, or after we've imported the device into the system tree, installed the agent. The next thing we are going to be talking about is our product updates. Now, in my environment that we're working out of, I do not have any actual product updates downloaded from the product download site. So I'm going to be utilizing that DAT file or utilizing the product update to simulate those updates themselves. But it works on the same philosophy though. If you can understand the structure of how it works, it doesn't matter what the update's for, you'll be able to make it work. Now, if we use endpoint security threat prevention as our option here, now we can see we've got our version control in here. So if we look at that major version 10.7.0 with the minor version being 6.177. So what we're going to do, we're going to be using threat prevention for our example, and then we're going to be having the client task. Yes, it is pointed at my DAT file because of that assumption that we would have downloaded it. I'm just using the vanilla lab environment that we work out of to run lessons. So first things we need to going back to our tag catalog to look at the design of that update-based tag. So just remember in the back of your head at the moment, 6.177 being that that minor version of threat prevention. So we go back to our tag catalog. Now we're going to be looking at our automation, and we're going to look at about our ENS threat prevention update tag. Now I did make another tag here that I decided not to use. We're just going to use this particular tag here. So in here, same structure, all those options are the same as you would have done for your deployment tag, but now one key difference is going to be around that criteria. This is the query we're going to ask the database to decide whether or not something needs an update. So the criteria I've built out for this one, and as you can see, 6.7.0.0 being that minor version. Notice it's a less than functionality. So it's literally based around here. This is the current version that the corporate environment is going to run. So you can put whatever the current version in there. It could be major version 5.7.0 with a minor version of 7.3.1.1, in which case we just put in here, yep, less than 7.3.1.1. Anything that does not have that correct version will then be targeted by the update for that product update that you've downloaded from the product download site, utilizing your grant numbers. Let's save that modification that I've made. It won't make any difference because I deliberately designed it so it was already targeting that one system that has it deployed. So that'll be targeting workstation 1. And then the process we go through from there, exactly the same process. Build out that client task. So building out our client task, but this time we're targeting a product update. Here's our product update task. As I said, I've designed this product update for the example just around the DAT file. If this was going to be a product update you've downloaded for DLP, ENS, Solid Core, you'd target those specific updates. So that way you're updating the correct product to the correct version. We then go through that assignment side. Back to our system tree to review. Have we done our assignment? We haven't done the assignment yet. So let's go in and we'll actually assign this one from scratch then. So I'm going to do this from the client task catalog rather than the client task assignment from the main menu. So I'm just going to assign my task. I'm going to target my new build part of the system tree. We then make sure we're targeting the correct task that we want to impact our systems with. We know that we want to use it based on a tagged update because you might be doing this now. This tag itself, we've identified based on that product version, but that tag update, this could be your point of sales only. It could be if you're in the health industry, it could be the people accessing health-based information. It could be finance-based information that you're targeting for this update to bring them up to the right versions or to different versions based on your security postures and such. So that's why we use the tags for this automation. So we'd sit there and we'd go, has one of these tags, or we could do a negative essentially and be like, does not have that tag as well. But we're going to do a positive based criteria and say, has this tag, select our update based tag. Our one system's now affected, which matches our workstation 1 that has ENS deployed. Select the time of day you want to do it. If you're running your product deployments at 3 a.m., maybe you want to run your product updates at 4 a.m., for example. That's going to be based on an organization specific need or specific assessment of your own networks and productivity and such. So I'm going to set mine for 4 a.m. instead of the 3 a.m. So I'm just splitting the tasks across the board, balancing out my network a little bit. I'm not going to worry about any of those other options. We're just going to leave them as is. We'll hit save. And we've now got that one assignment. That concludes our demonstration of our tags being used for automation for deployment as well as our product updates. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Nick, for the Q&A session. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anthony. As a reminder for everyone, Trellix Education Services offers exceptional training to go along with our award-winning products. If you would like to learn more, please visit the website listed on your screen to see all of our offerings. Now let's get our Q&A session started. I see we have several questions, but it's not too late to add your question. Please type it in the Q&A window to submit. Additionally, take a moment to fill out the survey. Your feedback and suggestions are always appreciated. What configurations would need to be made to automate an agent install as well as the product deployment?
Thanks. That's a great question that's been asked by our member. All right, so for configurations to automate an agent install, there's a few steps you would need to do. First thing you need to do is organize a Active Directory synchronization for the system tree. You then need to have an agent task run to identify that you've got a system in the tree that has not got an agent on there, which will apply that tag, and then run a product deployment task or a deploy task targeting specifically that tag to push it on there, and that'll be another server task.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one. Can task scheduling be tagged?
100%. Once again, this is going through that server task solution within EPO itself.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one as well. This one might be out of the EPO wheelhouse, but are there any current ways to run automated scans for, say, ENS on systems that were identified with a potential threat?
Yes, you can. So that actually links back into that question that I answered previously via text. So this would be utilizing your automatic response solution where you'd have to create that rule to identify that you've had that threat outbreak. You'd need to push that threat out, or the rules that you create essentially into this particular threshold that you're looking at. What you would do from there, have a tag. Now let's call it, say, for example, a high risk tag, have that tag criteria run as part of that automatic response rule, and then tie an ENS on demand scan straight into that particular tag to run at whatever time of day that you're trying to, or basically whether you run it immediately, whether you run it at a specific time, this will allow that scan to run. Remember, if you do have it run immediately, you'll need to wait until the next ASCII occurs, so it picks up that task to then commence the on-demand scan.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that one. Is there any means in EPO to throttle the number of deployments based on network availability due to slow network connected environments? Or maybe there's another solution for those systems that have a hard time connecting?
So what you could do for that is you'd have to use at your client task assignment side of things. So if we're looking at throttling the number of deployments, this is where in the examples that I built out, we ignored the randomization phase of things. So one way you could throttle that deployments or manipulate that deployment itself is increase a randomization window. So you could turn around and say, at a 1 hour window, the agent will pick a randomized time where it will deploy that specific task within that time zone. Another way you could manipulate it is to create multiple, what I like to refer as deployment tags. So let's say you've got a network of 500 machines. You want to break it down into 10 different deployments. So you're only doing 50 machines at any time. So you create 10 different tags, manually assign them instead of assigning them by criteria to the different systems, and then have your client task assigned 10 different times. So you don't have to build the client task again. You just assign it 10 different times, each time targeting a different tag, which will start to balance out your network bandwidth and things like that. Another methodology you can use, which we won't sort of go into here because it's not really going into your tags, is utilizing a peer-to-peer methodology, which is leveraging the agent technology in the background as well.
Oh, got it. Perfect. That's a good call out on the peer-to-peer. All right, thank you for that one as well. I appreciate that. Another question we got. We can add a tag automatically. Is there a way to remove a tag automatically? For example, we've added a tag and applied an endpoint isolation tag. Is there a way to automatically remove that once the system's ready for normal work?
That's a great question. So this one comes down to the tag criteria specifically, and that option to run the tag on each ASCII. So the way this will work in the background, so you've got the criteria. So whatever you've got to have the tag applied based on that criteria itself, what's going to occur is the ASCII occurs, so the agent will talk to the EPO system. EPO will then assess based on what the agents come back with all the different properties, is this tag relevant? Now, if you're using the default point of view in regards to your ASCIIs, so that's that 60 minutes by default, every 60 minutes, every computer will talk to EPO. So it's going to run that criteria. Now, if the tag was already applied, so it was isolated, if that criteria no longer applies because you've resolved whatever issue it was, that tag will be removed by EPO because it's no longer relevant to the workstation.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That makes sense. All right, thank you for that one as well.
No worries, some great questions coming through.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, it looks like that's all the questions that we've got for today's session. I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, and a big thank you to our speaker, Anthony. As a reminder, a link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This concludes today's webinar. Stay safe, everyone.